Hello and welcome to another beginner drawing course tutorial. You can always visit thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com for more. In this one we're going to be drawing better eyes, and it's going to be a quick tutorial just naming the different parts of the eye, show you a little eye drawing demonstration, and then you can hop off into a land of dreams and better eyes. So basically we have the sclera, that's the white part, the iris, which is the colored part, and the pupil, which is the very dark part at the center. You know, the part that is supposedly the window to the soul. So let's go ahead and draw our first eye. First, I want you to understand that it is in fact a sphere. It doesn't have to be perfectly spherical, but we have to understand that it has dimension and form. And if you want to know more about dimension and form and adding those to your shapes that you draw, then please by all means visit thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com, sign up for the mailing list, get some free tutorials about that. Otherwise, we can just have that, pretty basic eye sketch there. Then we'll just make a quick layer on top of it, draw in another circular shape, roughly about, 15% the size of our initial circle, and then at the very center of that one for the pupil. So that is, in fact, a pretty basic eye. You can always clean up the shape design a little bit of it. But this is, the geometry of the eye. However, we want to make sure that we include the eyelids. So those are two lids that stretch across the top and the bottom of the eye. What I'm going to do to showcase that, and again, this is just for demonstration purposes, we'll actually draw a more eye-like eye after this. I'm just going to draw 2 points here that I can extrude a arced line from, a curved line, and then another curved line to the other side. And then I'm just going to transform it a little bit so it fits the eye better. And now we can see that these eyelids are going to be over the top of that sphere. And one huge thing I want you to remember about the eyelids is that they have thickness to them. So they're not just, again, lines running across it, but they have volume, meaning that we can emphasize that by just kind of adding thickness to the line, creating dimensionality, creating form, all the stuff I talk about at the actual beginner drawing course lesson. But yeah, essentially that is our rough sort of demonstration or breakdown of the eye. Let's actually look at how we can apply this to a full kind of portrait so you have a little more context on how you can draw better eyes. Okay, so now that we have that quick portrait sort of drawn in so we have some context for the eyes, let's place them within this area that I've marked off. Now this area, if you can imagine a skull here, it is basically those two big eye sockets where we're going to be placing these, and they're also referred to as the orbicular sockets because you put an orb, which is the eyeball, inside those sockets. So typically I like to line the tear duct up with the sides of the nostrils, and then I'll measure out where the eye is going to end, much like I did with the eyelids on the demonstration you saw a little bit earlier. Then what you can do is you can start by drawing in the top portion, the top eyelid. And I like to do my eyes pretty simultaneously, not exactly at the same time rather, but just hop from side to side so that I can get rid of the asymmetries that are going to come up, because they will, especially when you're drawing a portrait from the front. It's just part of the game. I can see that these aren't perfectly the same length, but it's not too big of a deal. I'm going to scale it down just a teeny bit so that I can make sure that my placement and proportions are correct. Next, I'll do the same thing with the bottom eyelid, except I'm going to make that a little less obvious. I'm not going to connect it up quite as much. So now we have two eyes drawn in. I'm going to flip it just to check. This one's a little lower. Always flip your drawings, guys. I hammer that home in the beginner drawing course. Next, what I'll do is typically I'll start to add the thickness of the eyelid versus the orbicular socket. So the upper eyelid, there's a whole nother line that starts above the tear duct And depending on, you know, your ethnicity or your genetics, you will have, you know, more pronounced or more shallow eye sockets or eyelids, that kind of thing. But in essence, we're just trying to add a little more thickness from further away, and to showcase that thickness by adding that additional line above our first one. Next, we can kind of press out underneath the tear ducts, which again adds more dimension. Our mind will fill in the gap that there's, you know, more dimension around those spheres that exist inside the orbicular sockets. Now, one thing I'm noticing is the shape asymmetry now of this eye being a little more closed, this eye being a little more open, this one being a little more almond shaped, this one being a little more kind of oval-esque. So what I'm going to do is just adjust that quickly. Because again, you want to catch and fix things as early as possible. It just makes it easier for the long run because we want more symmetry, even if this guy's eyes are looking a little bit relaxed. And then, now that we have some thickness to those eyelids, which I'm emphasizing, but just going over the line, really just getting that point home. I'll also elevate it a little bit more, that upper eyelid, because there's an art to constructing these things, and that's what you're here to learn. So oftentimes there's a bit of a shadow shape that juts out and looks like this from inside the orbicular socket on this particular surface plane. If these terms are a little bit outside of what you understand right now, don't get too discouraged. You can always watch the free tutorials that I have on thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com, and those will help you to understand some of this terminology, but I'll cover it in later videos. Next, we finally can start to add in the iris and the pupil, because now we have the idea that it's, you know, a more spherical shape embedded within some eyelids. So I'll go ahead and I'll draw just two convex lines. And in this case, it's not perfectly symmetrical, which is fine. I just want to make sure that it looks like elements are lined up and that they have some life to them. So right now it looks a little weird because there are no eyebrows, but there's enough symmetry here to keep it. So I'll just fill those in a little bit darker, try to keep them as circular as possible. And I'm just going to emphasize the lower eyelid a touch more on that eye. Emphasize the tear duct a little bit. A lot of drawing is just emphasis and kind of sculpting those forms back and forth with the proper geometry and proportions. So finally, I will add some eyebrows, so I'll just draw those shapes in. The brow ridge on men is typically lower, so I'm going to keep it pretty close to the rest of the stuff that I've drawn. Can add some additional shapes just to help detail the forms a bit. With this slightly concerned gentleman. And yeah, basically it all comes down to simply creating enough symmetry between each eye and getting each part to go in, from sclera to iris to pupil, in a way that starts to express emotion and has a degree of symmetry that is not unnerving. So it's not perfectly symmetrical, like if you flipped it, it would be the exact same like I did with the ear, but rather just more natural looking, just so that you have some character. It doesn't look like you did it in a digital program, even if you did. There's ways to add just a little bit of emphasis either way, but that is essentially the basis of how I like to draw eyes. You can, increase the size of the pupil too, depending on how much light there is in the scene. So if it's very low light, the pupils are, much bigger, and it might make the character seem high if you don't do it properly. But bigger pupils are also a little more expressive in certain cases. There's all these things and little meters that you can tweak of sizes and shapes and things of that nature, just to help you get across what you're trying to get across whenever you're drawing eyes. This guy looks a little dazed. And sometimes it's just tweaking it a couple pixels or millimeters if you're doing it traditionally. But yeah, that about wraps up the demonstration. Remember that these are spheres. So there's actually a sphere inside here. And that the eyelids are there to kind of cover it, to add more depth and more expression. You can close them to various degrees, however you want to modulate it to kind of serve your scene, serve your portrait, and all that good stuff. But drawing better eyes is really just a matter of understanding the different parts and putting them together in ways that make sense for what you're trying to achieve. Just be clear about that. In this case, it's just a simple demonstration, but let's say, just for the sake of one last part of the demonstration, if I wanted to make him seem more surprised, what I would then do is I'll take these away so that I still have the largest shapes to work with, because I've got my big shapes all settled first. You can make it really small, the iris for example, and then the pupil even smaller so that you can see all of it. And this is definitely stylizing it. It's not perfectly realistic, but at the same time, he looks like he's seeing something that's shocking him now, because we're seeing both sides, or the full shape of the iris and the pupil. Whereas if you want to make them look a certain direction, you can kind of modulate it that way, like he's looking off to the side. And his other pieces of his face are kind of expressing pretty neutrally, but the mouth adds just a little bit of trepidation. Same with the eyebrows. You can make them, add a couple lines for expression. It's whatever, really. Whatever you want to do once you understand the basics of just shape design, keeping things nice and symmetrical as far as your proportions go, and understanding these different aspects of drawing as far as fundamental concepts go. So thank you for watching. Again, feel free to check out the beginnerdrawingcourse.com, sign up for the mailing list, and that will allow you to access 6 free lessons that go over some more of the stuff that I described. And then you'll be on your way to drawing better eyes and better in general, so long as you're able to put in the time, put in the effort, and practice. Don't get discouraged. Just have fun with it. Don't put a ton of pressure on yourself. It wrecks the fun. It really upsets your muse. So you'll learn a lot better if you're having fun. Anyway, oh, that expression is way too much. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and happy drawing.